So Jacqueline Glenn has done a video about the shootings in Paris. Okay, let's have a look at that.
Now, I know a lot of people are going to knee-jerk react to this and say, not all Muslims are terrorists. I know that. I'm not trying to say that. I would never say something like that. But I don't see a lot of moderates out there standing up and saying something about this. Honestly, most people that I see that claim to be moderates have this, ooh, don't piss them off mentality. I mean, if you're truly a peaceful person, then you should be very outspoken about this. It's not good enough for you just to simply be nonviolent yourself. You should stand up strongly against any violence in the name of your religion or God.
You obviously haven't looked very hard, as I shall now demonstrate.
Well, for some more perspective on this, with me now is Maajid Nawaz of the Quilliam Foundation, which is an organisation which challenges political and religious extremism. It's a terrible day, isn't it, Maajid?
Terrible tragedy. My heartfelt condolences go out to the families of the victims, the entire French population. It's important, first of all, to say that mainstream society, European society's reaction to this must be, as we've heard with many of your interviews, must be to stand on the principle of freedom of speech with the overwhelming majority of Muslims who also condemn this attack, to all of us unite and stand together on the principle of freedom of speech. And the prerequisite for that, what that entails, is an understanding that Islam, my faith, is an idea. No idea is above scrutiny. No idea whatsoever. To criticize, to scrutinize, and to satirize my own religion is not Islamophobia. It's what this magazine has been doing, as you've mentioned, with all other faiths and, in fact, with all other political ideologies as well. It's called political and religious satire. Muslims as a people have a dignity. There is such a thing as anti-Muslim hate, but we must distinguish critiquing the religion as an idea and picking on individual Muslims as a people.
And the converse of that, or the reverse of that, is that Muslims can criticise the magazine and say, we don't like this, you shouldn't do it, but there's a limit.
The Holy Quran criticises every other faith out there, so come on. I mean, and every other religion does the same to all the other religions. So, you know, we've got to be consistent in this. Likewise, on foreign policy, Muslim communities are critical, in many cases rightly so, like the invasion of Iraq, you know, whether after the torture report we spoke about human rights. So after this incident, Muslim communities, again, to be consistent, must start these conversations within their own communities about the medieval blasphemy traditions, the taboos that exist within our communities at the moment.
I mean, your work, the Quilliam Foundation work, is to deal with that small minority within the Muslim community who possibly think this is a good idea, this has been a good day. There are some people who think like that.
There are some people who would act out violence, others who would applaud the violence. Both these categories are a minority. Then you've got a larger section within Muslim communities who say the following: we condemn the violence, but we also condemn the publishing of the cartoons. And my message is primarily to that last group, which are the moderates, to say to them that that's not enough. We have to not only condemn the violence, because that's very easy to do. I mean, how low have our standards sunk if that's where we think that you know, our duty stops there? But all of us, not just Muslims, by the way, all of us in mainstream society have to reassert aggressively the human rights, liberal with a small l, principles that these societies are founded on. If all of us together, including Muslims, don't do that, then we're going to see two things happen in Europe, which I call the crisis of identity that's playing out across Europe at the moment. The first is we're going to see the rise of the far right, who will fill this vacuum and start condemning Muslims as a whole because there's a silence. And the second is we'll see the rise of Islamist groups further entrenching their positions and dividing and pulling back even more so because they see the rise in the far right. And we'll end up with a very, very divided society. The only solution to that is for everyone to stand together, including Muslims, I must emphasize, to start challenging this form of extremism.
Maajid, thanks very much for joining us. Maajid Nawaz there from the Quilliam Foundation.
We headed to the other side of Paris, to Barbès, a quartier where many of the country's 5 million Muslims live. At first, they didn't want to speak to us, but when they heard that we were from Britain, they opened up with a combination of sympathy, anger and fear. I asked him whether he felt insulted by the cartoons lampooning Mohammed from Charlie Hebdo. Yes, he said, but the violent response was unacceptable.
They were all insulted, they told me, by the drawings in Charlie Hebdo. They didn't like the fact that Mohammed was insulted, but none of them said that that justifies a violent response. And of course that's a really crucial point, because they also feel that what happened in Paris yesterday could be used against them, especially by the National Front.
So there we have evidence that moderate Muslims are already speaking out strongly against extremism. In the case of the police officer, he gave his life fighting extremism. We've seen both ordinary Muslims in the street speaking out and the leader of an organisation set up specifically to counter extremism within Islam. But apparently that's not enough for you.
I've been spending a lot of time on Twitter looking at this just to see the opinions of different people who claim to be moderates, and most of them take the approach that, well, she asked for it. Let me tell you something. A short skirt has never made rape okay.
Don't let your buddy Thunderfoot, who you've never had the guts to speak out against, hear you say that.
And if someone themselves aren't rapists, but they still hold that mentality, are they considered peaceful? Because I don't think so.
Again, I find that a lot easier to believe if you weren't friends with Thunderfoot, who thinks 90% of rape is really just bad sex. You also have no qualms being friends with a self-confessed statutory rapist, i.e. the Amazing Atheist. But I guess it's only Muslims who have to speak out against their own, right? Not anti-theists or anti-feminists. While we're on the subject, let's cast our minds back to this video you made a while ago.
Hey guys, so I want to talk a little bit about Elliot Rodger. Now, I know that there have been videos made about him before, and I don't want to repeat anything that's already been said.
Why? I thought you thought...
If you're truly a peaceful person, then you should be very outspoken about this. It's not good enough for you just to simply be non-violent yourself. I'm sure you've seen the video that he made several times, so I'm not going to sit here and show clips of that, but what I do want to say is that whenever a tragedy happens, and this is something that happens every single time, and it annoys the shit out of me every single time, people like to hop onto these types of issues like vultures. They see something, and they think it's going to help them with their movement or their political agenda, and they use it to their advantage, which is just disgusting.
Like you're doing here in the name of anti-theism and anti-Islamicism specifically.
And they like to downplay, in this case, mental illness. This guy was clearly mentally insane.
So, if any of the Muslims involved in the Paris attacks turn out to be mentally ill, I guess you'll revise your position?
I just don't like how these men are villainized so much, because just because you have a penis and balls does not mean that you need to be grouped and generalized with Elliot Rodger. And that's incredibly offensive to men when you do that. And I'm sorry, but this whole movement I keep seeing tweets like this, and it's so... It pisses me off. Like, look at the problems for what they are. Don't twist issues to suit your needs, to suit your movements, to promote your political agenda. Don't be that vulture that hops on every single tragedy to get out of it what you want. That is just so disgusting to me and so irritating.
Hypocrisy much?
And both of those hashtags are currently trending on Twitter, so if you want to use them, that'd be great to help promote the message. And a lot of people probably think that might be silly, or that talking about it on Twitter or different forms of social media is not helpful, but it really is, because we need to get the word out.
Well, it's not helpful if you don't know what you're talking about, which is the case here. So, to summarise, Muslim police officers are getting killed, Muslim civilians are putting themselves in danger. What are Jacqueline and her cronies going to be doing?
I think we really need to come together on this. I mean, every post you see, share it. Make your own posts, make your own videos, wear offensive t-shirts, hold offensive signs.
Wow, brave. So Jacqueline, before you start telling Muslims they should speak out against other Muslims, maybe you should consider speaking out against people within your groups. How about speaking out against the sexism, the racism, the homophobia, the transphobia that goes unchecked within both anti-theism and anti-feminism? Let me know what you think, everyone. Goodbye.
Richard's in Maidenhead. Richard, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I just want to say I agree with you to a point. I think any reasonable person knows that most Muslims have absolutely no part in this, and that, it is a real a fundamental and a very, very minority group who are doing this. But I think an apology is needed. You said before that if a Geordie person was doing this, should all Geordies issue an apology, and that was kind of a little bit ridiculous. But
why? Why is it any different? Why should Abbas, the last caller, apologise for what these murderers in Paris did?
Well, because I think the alternative is that there is no apology.
Have you apologised yet?
Apologise for what?
The murders in France on Wednesday.
Why would I need to apologise for that?
Well, why does Abbas? He was in Berkshire.
Well, no, because they're doing it in the name of Islam. If something was done...
Not his Islam. They might have been doing it in the name of Richard's. Wouldn't mean it was about you.
I know, but the...
So why haven't you apologised? You can do it now if you want.
No, there has to be some... These people are committing acts of terror in the name of Islam.
Not in the name of his Islam.
I know, and I do understand that.
So if I went and blew somebody up now and said I'm doing it in the name of Richards everywhere, you would feel you had to apologise? If that wasn't the shoe bomber called Richard Reed, have you apologised for him yet?
You're making it a bit ridiculous.
No, you are.
I'm really not. They're just...
OK, well, tell me why you haven't apologised for the shoe bomber whose name was Richard, because Abbas has to apologise for a terrorist who said he was a Muslim. Take all the time you want, mate.
OK, so these guys are from the Islamic community.
Yes, and the shoe bomber was from the community of people called Richard.
We need to feel some sense that there's some action in the Islamic community.
But I don't trust people called Richard anymore, so when are you going to apologise?
It's a bit difficult to argue against you when you're being like this. I'm just trying to make a point that these people are from the Islamic community, and there needs to be a sense that...
What does that even mean? Well, what does the Islamic community mean?
You don't understand what Islam is, what the Islamic community is.
Well, I know that Sunni and Shia kill each other every single day in this country on a scale that is nowhere close to what happened in France. So what do you mean by the community? You think they're on the same side, do you, those people killing each other in Syria at the moment?
No.
So what's the Islamic community?
The Islamic community in this country.
It's just everybody who has the word Islam on their religious affiliations, even if they actually hold murderous intent towards each other, which is bringing us back to Richard. Everyone who's got Richard on their passport is part of the Richard community. You're allowed to admit you've made a mistake, my friend.
No, I'm not going to admit that I've made a mistake. There needs to be a sense that we as a country...
I'm going to interrupt you there, Richard, which I think some might consider an act of mercy.